Welcome to the Authentic Dentist Podcast. Join Dr. Allison House of House Dental in Scottsdale and Shawn Zajas, founder of Zajas, a company helping dentists extend their care beyond the chair as they lead dentists deeper along the journey of authenticity to reach greater fulfillment in their professional lives and to deliver remarkable patient experiences. At the core of the Authentic Dentist is a belief that the answer to the current challenges in dentistry is dentists discovering that their greatest asset and point of differentiation is their personal brand, and that forming that brand out of their authentic selves is the best strategy for success in dentistry today.
Hey guys, this is Shawn with Dr. Allison House with the Authentic Dentist Podcast. And today we're going to bring you a cool conversation on a book that I've really been getting challenged by. And it's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I originally heard about this book because I had interviewed Allison. I don't know where she's living. I don't know if it's still in Canada, but she's like clear aligner coaching. And she's just like everything personal development. And in the interview, she mentioned this book. And for some reason, I was like, oh, I'll probably just listen to the interview again. I don't need to take notes. So I forgot about it. And then I was going back through it, even though this was like 7 months ago. And I heard that she recommended this. So I immediately look it up and see what it's about. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get this book because.
And it's The Big Leap?
The Big Leap.
The Big Leap.
It's basically saying like there are so many forces in our life that almost get us to stay out of the zone that we were meant to live in. And he goes over like, hey, there's the zone of incompetence, which is pretty much you're doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing because you don't know. It's not your strengths. It's not who you're called to be. And then if you move beyond that, you go to the zone of competence, which is like, oh, you're good at these things, but it's still not like the core of what you're meant to do. And then above that zone is a zone of excellence. And a lot of people, he says, get stuck here because it looks a lot like the last zone, but yet it's still not the core of who you are, what you're meant to do, and the light that you're meant to shine. And that's where that final zone is your zone of genius. And I think the reason why it's been challenging me is because I'm like, man, how much of my time do I spend in zone 2 and 3? And yet there's moments where I feel like I'm in zone 4. But for some reason, and he references, he talks in terms of energy a lot, how we do things consciously, unconsciously, to kind of like stop that positive energy in our life. And it just resonated with me. I'm like, man, I sabotage. I just do stupid things sometimes, probably even out of fear, to just make it so that I don't stay in that place of owning and occupying kind of like my superpower.
The zone of genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call it getting too big for my britches. My grandmother was a Southern belle, and she was mean as a snake. Oh my gosh. And she would tell me that I was getting too big for my britches whenever I would do something that was extraordinary. I guess that would be it. If I did something that was extraordinary, I was getting too big for my britches and I needed to back down and be more responsible, I guess. And I think that we get that message from lots of different places. That was a childhood message, but I think that's from all kinds of places. When you get a little too big, you get some criticism. People start to notice and want to get you back in your space. And then you just sort of internalize it. So you're afraid to step into that zone of genius and be who you're meant to be. But somehow we have to get over that. Somehow we have to be able to step in and be too big for our britches and work in the zone of genius. And it's hard.
Well, I'm just thinking about school, and like school can just be downright nasty. Like, like elementary school, middle school, typically, if you ever broke out from the norm or from just
Yes.
staying in line, you get criticized, crucified, laughed at, because all of a sudden people get threatened by it and they don't know what to do but make fun of you for it. So yeah, I would get made fun of a lot simply because of my joy. I'd be happy all the time and life was just good and I had a lot to be happy about and I was enthusiastic and excited, and somehow it turned into like people would always try to bring me down.
You were stepping out. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that.
No, like that rocks the boat. And it's like the second you said that you're too big for your britches, it's like, wow, we hear things all the time, or did, especially growing up, to just like color in the lines, play it safe, don't shine too bright, don't make other people feel uncomfortable. Like if you have a gift, you can't own it fully because, you're going to take attention away from other people.
But don't you feel like if you get to be in that zone of genius, then it's easy to bring other people there? Like it's safe. Come on and join me. So I don't think it's a good idea to just stay in the lines. I think it's okay to jump out and bring people with you. But it's so easy. I mean, I have all those messages too. I can remember as a kid playing dumb all the time, the dumb blonde. And I just hated it. But at the same time, I didn't want to be criticized anymore. So I was a cheerleader. I would just play it dumb. And that's absolutely not who I am at all.
Well, I think part of it is also you're gifted to to give your gift. Like, meaning the whole point of it, I think I love it. The idea of it being a gift is, what do you do with gifts? You give them. Like, you give them to other people, you hand them out. You don't ever hoard a gift.
No.
Like, gifts are meant to be given. So the gifts and the superpowers we were given, we need to own so that we can be that gift to other people to help unlock them. And like, once you see it as this like grand scheme of like everybody's interconnected, and like once you occupy that space that only you can occupy, you also stir up in someone else that courage to possibly have them level up in that area. Because when they see an original, they know. There's something about it they don't know what to do with, because it's like, man, like Allison is like, there's this weightiness, almost like glory, to the way that you've been aligned and the way that you're living aligned, and it challenges other people to have to deal with that. You're like, you can't be a counterfeit and feel comfortable if you're around an original.
I mean, I appreciate that. I do think there's been some pioneering on my part where I've walked into spaces and been criticized, but then other people behind me have been allowed to step in those spaces too. And so that's worth it. It's worth being criticized, but it's not comfortable. And I would say that there are a lot of times when I try and keep myself small, not too big, because I don't want to upset people. But it never turns out well when I just sit in that level of competence, even excellence. I really like to be in that zone of genius. It's my own brand of genius, but it's mine, and I like to occupy that space. But it's tough. It's tough.
Well, oh man, you just said something, and it's like my mind's going like all over the place. What were you? Okay, what did you just mention?
That I don't like to sit in that zone of competence or even excellence. I like to jump into that zone of genius. I like to live there, and I do feel like it's pioneering for other people when I do that. Like I think about my daughter and my son, the fact that I've allowed myself I ran for president of the Arizona Dental Association. I was in the Council for General Practice, the ADA, and those are places that were uncomfortable to occupy, forced me to think differently than I'd ever thought before. But because I did that, my children are like, well, I could try and be bigger than I am right now. And that has inspired them to do more and be more. And they're wonderful people. And they aren't me. I mean, neither one of them are dentists. They're not going to occupy that space, but they have their own brand of genius.
Okay, so I know what it was, though. It was what you were saying about you didn't want to cause conflict.
Yeah.
So many people that are peacemakers, or just humans that care about other people and don't want to create a break in harmony, friendship. It's like we get conditioned as a kid. Like, what do you want? Do you want to be isolated in your strength and misunderstood, or do you want to have friends and just kind of blend in, more or less? Like,
But aren't you misunderstood there too?
You are, but
because it's not really you.
Right. But I think that's one of the lies that people that really care about other people end up almost trying to fit in more, just so they don't make other people feel uncomfortable. And it comes from a place of genuine empathy, genuine care for others, and that genuine sense of just, I want to have belonging in my life. And sometimes our gifts don't make us feel belonging. They exclude us. They make us feel like alone and by ourselves. Think of like every superhero story where it's like, oh my God, you're weird. Like, you can do that. Like, it's like you're not one of us anymore, because we're all comfortable being comfortable, and now you're making us incredibly uncomfortable because you're doing something that's like hard to understand.
But don't you feel like you're uncomfortable even just in the competence? I mean, I can remember as a teenager trying to fit in, trying to be, but that actually wasn't who I was. And I think people knew that anyway. So it wasn't like I really belonged. Maybe I got invited places, but I didn't really belong because I wasn't speaking my truth, what was happening to me. I just wanted to fit in. So I feel like I was uncomfortable no matter what. You might as well be uncomfortable in the zone of genius. I mean, if you're going to be uncomfortable, might as well
I
just be there.
agree, because it's exhausting. Now, especially when we look at it in the macro, like over a decade, it's exhausting faking it. It's exhausting doing something that or like trying to live someone else's life because you're not courageous enough to just be like, I matter, my message matters, who I am matters. That's the whole point of the zone of genius, right? It's identifying and aligning who you are and your giftings and your strengths, and aligning that with your vocation, so that you're not spending 40 hours a week not doing anything in your zone of genius. It doesn't mean you're going to spend 40 hours a week in that. It just means the more you're able to set yourself up to, and I guess this is where I'm curious in a practical sense, how it lands for a dentist. Like, does the zone of genius manifest itself in the way that you brand your practice, in the way that you have a culture, in the way that you interact with your team, or in the way that you pursue clinical pursuits? Like, I'm not a dentist, so I'm not quite sure where that intersects.
Well, I think what's interesting is that every person, every dentist is a little different on what their zone of genius is. I mean, some of us are really, really talented with our hands. And so that's the area that we need to grow. You know, we need to build, we need to design. Other people are better with the relationship. So building that relationship with patients, building a relationship with your team, that's your zone. And so that's where you need to work. Other people are better at business or marketing or whatever it is that's your area that you are super good at. Don't ignore. That's where you're going to shine. And then you get other people to do. If you're not great with your hands, you have a lab that does that work for you. If you are great, then you're doing your own lab work. But all of that is important because you're shining in your own way.
So in your dental journey, when did it become clearer this is, in the whole realm of dentistry, this is the area in which either I come more alive, or I'm more able to be gifted or express my giftings in? Like, when did that become clear?
Okay.
Or
So
is it just starting now, like in
no,
this
it's
last
just so
season?
odd. It's analysis. So I've worked in all the other areas. So I can relate to people. I've worked really hard in that area. I'm better with my hands. I won't say I'm great with my hands, but I'm better with my hands. I can make things happen. But my zone of genius is definitely the analysis, the putting together what all the data that the patient has given me and solving whatever it is. So they're telling me X, Y, and Z. So this is the diagnosis. These are all the people they need to see. This is the medical piece that they need. That is where I think I shine.
But when did you, meaning, the problem with zone of genius is that most of us assume everyone else is wired that way. So it's not really, like, it's kind of like, oh, other people don't have these abilities to analyze. Like when did it
I think
become,
everybody has the ability to analyze.
but not at the level?
It's just my superpower.
That right.
But I don't have the hand skill that some of my colleagues do. That, God, I wish I had it,
But
but
I'm
it
just saying,
isn't.
you might have assumed early on, well, everyone has these abilities. Like, it's common sense that I can put pieces together like this when I hear what my patient's saying. Or did you never view it as common sense? Like, I'm just saying, because most people almost like downplay what they're great at because they just assume, well, that's just how everyone is.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you do assume that everyone is like that until you start to get some evidence that, oh, not everybody has thought about things in this way. And it's all of it. I mean, I do a lot of analysis of my life. I'm very, very good at that. I'm not good at other things, but this is my zone of genius. And that's okay. If we all could come together and do the piece that we're best at, I kind of feel like the world would be a better place.
Okay, so one other thing. One way that I've heard people could identify what your superpower is they say, like, what is it that you got in trouble for as a kid? Because typically,
Speaking my mind.
you have this gift in a very immature psyche, in a very immature individual. So maybe it's the person that's talking all the time, or so-called arguing. I got in trouble for arguing all the time as a kid just because I could be logical and it makes sense, maybe even persuasive. So it's like I had some sales abilities, but it got viewed as like, why are you always, telling, you know what I mean? Like my son, I know he's going to be a prolific speaker. And yet there's so many times where like, dude, just be quiet. Like, just stop talking. So most of the time they say that's a key to understand what your superpower is like, where were you misunderstood as a kid? What did you get in trouble? Because typically it was something that you were passionate about or naturally gifted at, but it was still immature and often misused. And that's why you got in trouble.
Yeah. I thought your gift was creativity.
I don't know what my gifts are.
I'm going to say that that's a big piece of it. The creativity, the inspiration. I can see how you get in trouble that you would just say things that people are like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay,
I think that's the analysis. The analysis is you look at what you got in trouble with as a kid. Where are you afraid to go that you should go? And how do you step into that and just take the criticism to be who you are? Because you're going to be uncomfortable no matter what. You might as well be uncomfortable in your genius.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Dentist Podcast. To join Allison and Shawn on this journey, hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode. Here's to your success. Express yourself fully. Live authentic.